is, thank you. What I'd like to do is take several topics, take several areas that will be helpful to us. Sometimes halacha is purposeful. There will be a psak halacha, or sometimes halacha, occurs because the occasion demands it. But sometimes, sometimes halacha comes and waits a long time before it becomes fully relevant. And it starts strange, then all of a sudden it has something to say. So I'm going to deal today with the topic that's linked to Siman Aleph of artificial insemination. I don't come as a doctor, don't come as a professor, so don't worry, you can correct me on all that. But I'm going to want to deal with the issues and how we look at post-scheme. In this case, today will be mostly one post-scheme, or at the end, I'd like to give a review of several other post-scheme or more contemporary post-scheme and the issue of artificial insemination. It could be that I should have sent out articles or had you look it up. I think most of you know, and there's a lot of questions regarding artificial insemination. It's a new thing, because it's a new thing. I mean, it's a new thing halachically, I'm going to say it's old, but it's a new thing halachically because it's new in general. It's one of those issues that are manifold and have great meaning, but start with, it starts with stuff that's really new to us. You want to read up articles, there's plenty of articles out there. A lot of them just talk about technology. And therefore I'm purposely, for a lot of reasons, but also it suits me, going back to an earlier time when the use of the of halacha, of a little bit of halacha material shows its seams in terms of creating a halachic approach. And so I was looking at my Zeta, who's behind me in the pictures, my Alta Zeta, my great-grandfather's shoot responsa, and this one is on Eben Hazer, and it's linked to this, it's linked to all the Simanim Eben Hazer, or most of them, and I thought it might be interesting. I have an introduction. When I talk about that, there's questions, let me review some of the questions that may come up. Questions, there are questions about paternity when there's artificial insemination, husband, and the artificial insemination donor. That term is artificial insemination donor is not used too much anymore because it spelled out aid, which turned out to be a disease. So they dropped it. And you guys are probably still too young to know when they died, they dropped it. But so they dropped it. But there's questions about paternity, questions about NIDA. Can you do it? Can it be applied at a time when the woman is in NIDA? How much of a mitzvah is it? How far does one go? How does it affect relationship? It's about halachically as well between husband and wife, if that's the situation. There's the yichus factor, which I'm going to come back to. What yichus also means inheritance. Is the child really the child? In what way is the child to the father? If it's artificial insemination donor, one case could be made. Husband, that's one case. If it's artificial insemination donor, maybe it's a different type of situation. If it's artificial insemination donor, is the donor a dad? Halachically, What about mixed sperm? In fact, even the whole question of artificial insemination donor, like, what does this mean in terms of family life? And many times, the poskim talk about this in psak language. But since we're all going to be poskim, even though everyone here, just by virtue of the generation we live in, are already sociologists of one form or another, social critics, critical theory, but we're also going to be poskim. We have to see how these questions were viewed by poskim and how they started thinking about it. But I want to say something more about this. In a sense, it's my kind of a trigger alert, because I don't think, oh, Ilan, I didn't mean it to be funny. Even I can trigger something. At least I used to be able to. Because actually, I think very quickly the issues get very serious, and it's very deep. Halachically, I'm in favor of artificial insemination, donor and husband. That's not radical today. One must look at the social background of the conversation. I said, think about a posek, but you also got to think a little bit sociologically. We have to look at rabbinic views I'm reading now, especially the ones that have generally been refused, rabbinic views that have been refused by the rabbis, kind of hava aminas, ways, directions they could have gone, which was basically to shut it down, and were eventually by the rabbis pushed off by many, not all. And some of these views nonetheless have an echo, have a shadow, they still exist in halacha. Very few views leave completely. They're still somewhere. So we're going to see that. I think so, they are somewhere. And some of those views are going to strike someone here as primitive, including maybe myself. It's hard for me to look at. But we're also looking at a conception of reality that is different. Certain beliefs, which can come out primitive, but certain concerns that just might be very different today. But the question of what's lost and what can be refused, and do some of these, and as I just said, some of these, do they still exist? Well, let me say it now a different way. Let's look at situation. The people that you will deal with as rabbis. I sound like a rabbi saying it this way, but the people who deal with rabbis, very few of them have birth at home. Very few have birth within a community. Rabbis are talking in that direction. Very few see birth as a political statement. Some do, but very few, or as a communal statement. With the medicalization of birth, the germ-free atmosphere of birth, the presence of maybe one person or two people as opposed to the whole family, it's a different situation. Let me try to say it also another way. The current general disassociation of sex from the goal of pregnancy and birth. Last time I quoted, that Gemara on Samach Aleph, Amud Aleph, or Amud Bet, which says that bia that is not for the purpose of procreation is biat zenut. Very few people that or that you're going to come in contact would like to say that. They like to say something else about that kind of intercourse. Birth and sex have been separated, except not always, but often. Sex is also often separated in fact or in consciousness from necessarily complete commitment or sanctity. Do I sound like a right-wing pundit on the, but okay, I'm thinking these thoughts. We'll come back to a lot of this in wedding laws, and also our community, which embraces a very large group of people, straights and gays and trans and many other definitions, who are at the same time people who are really committed to halacha or want to be committed to halacha. How does this speak to them? Not just as a trigger alert. I'm making any sense? I'm talking about the difficulty I have, but also the attraction I have to talking about this topic. And I think actually it's worthy of conversation. I'll add one or two more things. Yichus, for example, which is a major concern. Who are you marrying into? What kind of family does the person come from? The presence of Jews or non-Jews. At the same time, the whole notion of ger shni gayer kekatan shenolad dami, the miracle of the birth of someone who comes into our community, rubs up against the whole yichus issues. And these are within a situation in which the claiming and establishing of identity as a possibility or as a right or as an expectation, let's say conversion, the simplest one, that you're in a relationship and there's an expectation or a hope or a plea that the partner will convert. That's given in a situation today in which people decide their own identities, in which people make their own identities, in which they form their own communities or semi-communities based on their identity. But that whole aspect with conversion, my Zeta, my grandfather was a big Rav in Chicago, a really big Rav in Chicago, never did a conversion. And expected, I did very few conversions. I think back in LA, in terms of, I was unorthodox, but I was involved 20 conversions, 25 conversions. I was trying to that. My grandfather didn't do one. My great-grandfather, the man behind me, I don't think he ever did a conversion. That wasn't part of the reality. One of the problems we have problems everywhere, but one of the deep problems we have in Israel is that many of the Rabbanim who may wear black hats, et cetera, but some of them are really terrific guys. They never had someone in their family converted. They have no idea of that reality in one form or another, except for maybe a threat to yichus, writ small or writ large, or the very fact that conversion can be a nace, can be a miracle, so makes the system overwrought. You have to pray for the miracle, and the miracle has to happen in a miraculous way. It's so overwrought that it makes it a very difficult situation. So I think that as we start looking at psak, there's a lot of humor there, and there would be serious things as well. We cannot help, or talking about myself, I cannot help about thinking inside the box being halacha, outside the box, meaning outside the box, just being a contemporary human being. But I also very much wanted to be able to think inside the box, but also bring into the box or inside the box concerns that we have outside of the halachic box. So there's different, I think you catch what I'm saying. I'm I'm ready to take a comment on this or two, and then I want to get into the learning. And I apologize for, I'm not sure yet. I'm a little worried, wrongful comments, but I really plan not to censor the rabbis and not to be too apologetic. I will make the case sometimes for them, but not to be too apologetic. And I will not censor I will not try to respond to you in a poor way by censoring my comments, or else we'll just have to go back to sharing wonderful divrei Torah that we said or heard under a chuppah. So we don't need to do that here. That's not our work. But any comments? All right. So where does strange halacha begin? So if you now go to your mechaber, you go to the Shulchan Aruch, right? Siman Aleph. Very interesting statement. I'll try not to read all the time, but I'm going to read a little bit right now. At the end of Vav, at the very end, the Hagah, it's a very small Hagah. We're talking in Vav regarding when do you fulfill when does the male, I said you, but referring to a male, when does the male fulfill his chiyuv of Peru or Vu? And we went to, we talked about numbers. We did that last week, but we didn't mention the Hagah there. Haya haben mamzer. Oh, very interesting with the word mamzer. I say mamzer, and I refer to my neighbor as a mamzer. But that's a different connotation, right? Haya haben mamzer. O cherish shota, cotton shouldn't be there. O cherish shota, kiyem ha-mitzvah. So I'm taking this itself. Cherish and shota had the status of the imbecilic status, unless it was proven otherwise. But this is pre-Helen Keller, pre all the great education that took place. A mamzer, we can make the case the other way, but so I am happy with this statement, because if you fulfill Pru or Vu with these offspring have full worth in terms of this great goal of Pru or Vu. So that's there. That's going to be the touching off place. I said enough. Joel, would you read the Chelkat Mechokek, which on Chet?
On Chet, Haya haben mamzer v'chulei. Yesh lihistapek. Isha shenita bra be'ambate im kiyem ha'av piriarvia v'im mikre beno l'chol davar. All right, so this is a question about someone who gets essentially, it's like artificial insemination. Essentially, someone gets pregnant through a bath.
So yeah, just like you're giving me the punchline right now?
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. Yeah.
It's not like artificial insemination. Artificial insemination is going to be like this.
Yeah, you're right. This is my causality is lost here. So it's
okay, thanks.
All right. All right. Likutei Maharil nimsa sheben sira hayab beno shel Yirmiyah shirachas be'ambate, right? Kisir begematria Yirmiyahu. All right. So we have a tradition that Ben Sira was actually Yirmiyahu's son, but it was through this odd form of pregnancy that happened. Vayin besefer avodat hakodesh leharav ish eloki moreno harav rabbeinu. I'm not sure who it is.
Cordovero. You went to
Cordovero.
That's all you studied. Okay.
Fair enough. Yeah. You're right. That's all. Bechalak atachlit parakid zayin. And I'll skip the parent. Should I skip the parenthetical here? Or, no, it goes for a while. So Avzilshano, Sefer Yetzirah, Mizman Avraham Avinu, Alav Shalom, Nimsa ben Umato Hakdusha, וירמיה, עליו השלום, בזמן בית הראשון, היה מתעסק בו כמו שנמצא בספר הביטחון, שעשה רבינו somebody בן בטרה, עליו השלום, הביאו רב חמי גאון ז"ל בספר הייחוד, וגם הביאו all these people, ספר הקדוש כנ"ל, ז"ל בספר הפלאה, שירמיהו הנביא עליו השלום היה מתעסק בספר יצירה, בינו לבין עצמו, יצתה בת קול ואמרה, קנה לך חבר, הלך אצל סירה בנו, נתעסקו בספר יצירה 3 שנים, לקיים הכתוב, אז נדברו יראי השם וגומר עד כאן לשונו.
What is all this stuff?
Well, the main thing is that this is actually, that it seems that Ben Sira actually was Yirmiyahu's Ben, according to all of this, right?
Right.
That's
And Ben Sira's status within Chazal
is good, is very good.
is
They
really
like,
good.
yeah.
He didn't make the canon, but almost.
But and gets quoted in Gemara all the time, right? It's gets quoted
150 or whatever it is, quotes,
yeah.
Positively.
Mhm. So,
Okay, so they have this, but what's all this other stuff here with Cordovero and all that stuff?
yeah, this is it's, well, number one, it seems not only that he was his son according to all these different sources, but that they were dealing with Sefer Yetzir, so they're in mysticism, right? The two of them are learning mystical stuff together.
So, so first of all, the context is kept very mystical.
Mm-hmm.
And the other part is he's a worthy person.
Yeah.
There was no problem. There's no problem here with him. He has a full positive status. And okay, this is what they quoted here. So if you were passing on artificial insemination, what would you say?
Right here, this is a check in the box that it's good, that, or at least it works to make the person your son. It created a very positive person history, so it sounds like it's a good thing in general. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think if I wanted to push back on that, I would say, yeah, Yirmiyahu Hanavi, who had maybe a special status or special circumstances, but maybe not other cases. That it's if I wanted to push back, I'm not necessarily going to go there.
Right? No. It's still on its own basis, but it has a miraculous parts to it.
Yeah.
It's clear because it's crazy, right? What's the assumption here in terms of the birth, the pregnancy and the birth?
Immaculate conception.
Anybody? Right?
Yavni, say it again.
I said immaculate conception.
Immaculate? That's pretty good. If it's not immaculate, it's actually, water.
Yeah.
Born thing. I mean, that somehow the father ejaculated into the water. The water carried the sperm entered, and then you had a pregnancy, and it's clearly halachically something that we usually say, davar shelo shchiach, this is not a normal way of doing it. And how do you know, right? By saying that he is a proper son, they take care of a lot of problems here, including any suspicion about the mother.
Rav Lennis,
yeah.
Is the assumption here that the mother is Yirmiyahu's wife, or is it? Do we have any information on this?
No more information than this. Okay. Let's now look at the Beit Shmuel brings his own thing. Beit Shmuel is on the opposite side of the page, and it's Yud Aleph, the Beit Shmuel. Okay. So Josh, you want to try that? Hoya ben Mamzer, and then it continues, but this is referring to the Sefer Hasidim.
Yeah. בספר חסידים, סימן תקוף, כתב, דלא קיים פריה ורבייה, כשהוליד ממזר, דקיימא לן ממזר אינו חי, ממזר אינו חי, ואפשר,
Yeah, that's what it said. Mhm.
אפשר
No,
ספר
wait, so this,
חסידים.
I would stop it there.
Yeah, what's
What's
דקיימא
the-
לן?
What's your problem with this?
In what way is a mamzer not alive?
Well, if you were going to give shot, what would you say? You'd say the Ramah is wrong. Have a mamzer is a terrible mamzer is a terrible situation to be in. That's not a life. You can play with it.
Right,
And
we have the Asara Yochasim that came from Babel, and mamzer is one of them. It's the lowest.
so we
He's
have,
Jewish.
yeah, right.
He's
So,
alive.
so this is so you're pushing back. But how could the Sefer Hasidim say this? No, you're talking about another Kabbalistic book or popular Kabbalistic book, right? No one ever learned Sefer Hasidim. No one ever, there's no base medrash in which they would sit down and learn Sefer Hasidim, but it was very influential in 12th, 13th century, well, 13th centuries, right? But there's a problem for the Beit Shmuel, right? And so he says the following. He explains, after.
ואפשר ספר חסידים איירה כשאינו יהודי,
Yeah, I think that's it.
דהוא ממזר, אז ממזר אינו חי. אבל אם ידוע
No,
דהוא ממזר,
Eno Yodea.
Enochai, it has no social reality.
My version
No
has
one
Eno
knows that
Yodea.
he's a mamzer. It has no social reality. There has no halachic reality. Yeah,
My,
what do you say,
my
Rav?
version has Eno
אינו
Yodea.
יודע.
I agree with Rav Nachum based on the seifa of this statement that's going to come up.
Right. Okay, I'm sorry. So אפשר ספר חסידים אריה כשאינו יודע דהוא ממזר, אז ממזר אינו חי. אבל אם ידוע דהוא ממזר, קיים האב פרי הרבייה, אז חי.
So the idea is if we have someone that we're worried might be a mamzer, we make the assumption that a mamzer wouldn't live and therefore they aren't a mamzer. Is that what's going on? Or-
What's the backstory?
I saw it a bit differently. I think it's a Safek Mamzer, and Safek Mamzer can pretty much marry anyone. He has no social status whatsoever, right? So in this case, he's saying that Enochai, like there's no way for him to get into the Kahal. That's the way I understood it.
I think the backstory
Yeah.
is that this is, it's a product of a illicit relationship, right? There's a son that comes to the mother had a lover. And then there's a mamzer who comes from it, but there is no mamzer. No one knows that this son's father was not married to her, that he was an adulterer. But in that case, what happens is he does well, the father, because the kid's not a mamzer and therefore he's not found out. But he doesn't get the credit for being a father. He
Well,
doesn't get the credit.
I tend to
Yeah.
agree with what Ruben said, that if he's a Safek Mamzer, then he's Eno Chai because of what we say that you have to, your children have to have children. And if he's going to be a Mamzer who's a Safek Mamzer, then he can't marry a Mamzer and he can't marry a non-Mamzer. So he can never have children. He'll never have grandchildren.
Let me
So
ask
it's
you
like
this.
he's not alive.
The Yesh Lahavi riot starts by saying this needs to be a proof, right? A proof to what? A proof to, what's it a proof to?
You're in Yud now?
Still, I'm in the same one. Oh, I'm
Wait, wait.
sorry. You're right. No, you're right. I'm sorry, I've skipped up by mistake. I think your pshat's correct. So actually, I gave the wrong citation. We should go to Yud It's my mistake. You should go to Yud, right above Yud Aleph. And where it says, Kota in the middle, Kota the Chelkat Mechokek, Yesh Lehistapek. There was a question. He has it that way. Does our Chelkat Mechokek say yes? Yesh Lehistapek. Isha
Yeah.
Shenita Bra Bambatya. Okay. Ima Av Kayam Kiyam, excuse me, Prurubu. Vim Nikra Beno L'chol Davar. In other words, you just quote the Chelkat Mechokek. The Yesh Lahavi Raya, that's where I got confused, I'm sorry. The Yesh Lahavi Raya, Bimasha Katu Bagos Smak Sefer Mitzvot Skoton, Vahabach Hevi, the Yeridea Siman Kutsari Beit, Isha Musheret, Sha'al Tishkav El Sadin, Sheshachav Alehem Ish Acher. Pen Tit Aber Meshich Zera Shel Acher. Gezerah Shema Yisa, and then there'll be a problem. This Shema Yisa, Achoto Be'aviv, Nishma Dahavi Beno L'chol Davar. So it compares it to the case of lying on the sheets, and the sheets had a man lying there before. And the man that they're saying about here is you got to be careful because it's not your husband. You could get pregnant. This is more in vitro that you can get because it's coming from the, and in that case, what's the problem? Problem is, well, we don't know the yichus, right? We don't know the yichus, so then you can have sisters and brothers unknowingly, unknowing that they're sisters and brothers, end up marrying each other. So that's the case.
I don't
And that's
understand.
it.
I don't understand
go
his riot. His riot doesn't seem to be a riot to me.
Why isn't that a riot?
Because all he's saying is that you were afraid that he'll marry Shema Yisa Achotome Aviv, whoever that Aviv is.
No. But
That
the
just means that
riot,
that Aviv, whoever he is, whoever that Zerah came from, he'll. Oh, I see. But that Aviv
but
is
it's a
another
riot
man.
to the proof of paternity.
In other words, there is paternity for that
There
other
is
man,
paternity. Yeah, that's the proof.
and therefore he's a mamzer also.
Okay, so be a mamzer. What do you got, Sarah?
Yeah, I was just confused why he didn't just say the problem is the kid's a mamzer, as opposed to being like, oh, the problem is that down the line he's not going to know who his father is, and then he's going to end up marrying his
Yeah,
sister.
no, I
inadvertently
gave the proof from the other spot and that was wrong. So therefore that's
No,
not,
but it seems like on this question, like
yeah,
I mean, maybe this is just he's quoting the smack, and this isn't what the smack says. So maybe I have a question on the smack. But my question is, isn't
Maybe
the
he's talking about a woman. Maybe he's talking about a penuya.
all they're proving is
yeah,
that
maybe it's a
paternity
penuya.
can legitimate, is that it? To hear it, I don't think they're talking about illegitimate necessarily, or can real paternity come from an unusual source, and the source will be a sheet full of sperm.
It just
Does
seems
that
like,
constitute creating paternity?
just to go back to Rev Nachum's question for 1 second.
Elon, I didn't write this myself. I got the script. The script was given to me. Yeah,
go
who, yes, Joel. Oh, Ilana, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, Rev Landis, you haven't offended me yet, and I'm still waiting. And every crazy thing you can think of, I feel like I've already thought of myself. This is such a great conversation.
But also, Alana, I also, in terms of Sarah's question, I want to bring in, like, Alana, what you wrote in the chat, because I think this is bothering me too, is I'm not convinced that if there's actually no sex that happens, right, does the child become a mamzer? Do we know that for a fact?
Well, there's no, when you say sex, you mean no penetration?
No penetration.
No touching, whatever. No, that, yeah, exactly. That's the case. This is what we have. What we just did right now is we chewed it up a little bit. And this more or less didn't fully die. Rav Eibschitz talks about it, some other people talk, but then Rav Eibschitz was a Sabbatean, so who knows? But so there's very little, but the proof, and first of all, again, the Mechakat Mechokek, who brings it up, he said, Yeshli, he stopped making. Right? In other words, I'm not sure. I mean, this is doubtful. And the Beit Shmuel clearly is reaching when he brings this case. But I think the proof I think the proof in this case is not a bad proof. It says the father, it connects a biological act. I don't want to call it a sexual act exactly. I'm not sure where it should be. A biological act of ejaculation onto a sheet with pregnancy, and saying that the father is not removed, but the father is the father. For good, for bad. If it's her husband, rabbis don't have a problem necessarily with it. He had a nocturnal emission. You don't necessarily, he wasn't masturbating, he had a nocturnal emission. She was on the sheet, she's pregnant now, fine. So that shows that that case and the case with the water, in the water case, that and I can say it better, that non-sexual intercourse can still have a father and can have a son. And that's all being discussed here. Yeah, Gary?
If we're talking about Yichus, then what about the status of B'nai Nida? Which we haven't touched on here, but.
Yeah, okay, so we'll get there. You're right. So I mean, because part of this is, it creates a status, it creates pregnancy, and it creates and a blessed bundle afterwards. It creates pregnancy, a blessed bundle. But how is it as a sexual act is not really discussed. And the Yeshli Stape. And I don't see that the Beit Shmuel is really pushing it so far. He said, here's a potential raya. Here's a proof. So from there, I think we can move on. I think now we have it. Now what we have it is, yes, according to Chazal, pregnancy can take place, impregnation can take place through an act which doesn't seem to be a classic sexual act. I don't know what term to use for it, but and there is a stability, if you want to talk about it that way, a stability in the sense of status. There's a father and there's a mother and there's a baby, and maybe there's a problem in terms of who the father is, but not necessarily. And now we see that things occur. And what? It's how they're also pushing, I should say. And this is a proof that this fulfills Pru Urvu. This could be very good for in vitro artificial insemination conversation. If this is a proof that without sex, you can have the mitzvah of Pru Urvu being accomplished. Okay, now we got the shot. And that's, but I kind of know it because from what we did later on, let's turn to the hard speak. So the hard speak, and that is, I sent you stuff. I'm sorry, I may have sent too much. Yavni said I sent some things twice or whatever. And from the sheets I sent you, it's page 7. Page 7, you'll see it says 7 in a circle on top. And here, this is answering a shaila from London, and this is in December of 1955. And the man writes, can we do this through Hazra'a Malachutit, artificial insemination? And if not, we'll do imuts. we'll do adoption. There's a hidden issue in this, by the way. And the hidden issue is not all poskim were positive about adoption. And you still have groups that are Hasidic groups mainly right now, that are anti-adoption. I don't think there's any adoption in Chabad. They don't adopt. They're not the only Hasidic group. It's a yichus issue. It's a problem, anyway. So that's a hidden issue in here, is that there's two choices. Can we use this new thing, artificial insemination, or can we do, or we go on the emuts? We go in this this issue. And actually, this Trubin, a lot of ways, surprised me. I'll do the first paragraph, and then Ilana, you're going to work on the second paragraph, okay? Yeled Kazeh Al Yadei Hazra. I'm doing this second paragraph. He says, I'm giving you the halacha. Yeled Kazeh Al Yadei Hazra Al Malchutit Shehi Teled Mechomer Zela Shel Ishacher. So this artificial insemination donor. Lagabe Haba'al Eino Nechshav Livno. V'zeh Pashut. Lagabe Ha'isha Yesh Lo Din Ben Laim. He's a son to the mother, but the father has no. They want to be making a family. He says, I have to tell you this. But there's another issue that's taking place right now in terms of the psak so far. What's he saying about artificial insemination donor? What is it not? It's not adultery. Okay, when he passed him this, almost all the poskim were already saying that's adultery. And this became a very big issue between the Satmar Rav and Rav Moshe Feinstein, if I remember, in America on this issue, but I don't remember it exactly. But I do remember the Satmar Hasidim Satmar Rav came out very strongly, and this is where, by general category of yichus, this is adultery. This is a genetic material. It's not the husband's genetic material. This is, so the Hartzvi says, look, I can't connect the son to the father, although there's more to be said later on. But at this point, he says, I can't connect the son to the father, but the son is genuinely connected to the mother. And there's no term here of mamzeris. She committed an act of zinut, immorality. It's not there at all. That's not there. In other Piskei Halacha, which we'll see part of it, one part maybe if we have time, see one part maybe, he says adultery is only physical penetration. It's a sexual act. That is adultery. Well, there's things that are close to adultery physically, but anyway, it's only when it's physical. It has nothing to do with the genetic material.
What you mean?
Like that. That makes all sense of artificial insemination,
I think
with the donor possible.
you mean particularly mamzer is only by penetration,
Right,
not just adultery, but the
Right.
result.
right, exactly. Thank you. Right. So these are choices, right? Choice made. Now, Ilana's do a couple lines. Chomer.
Okay, and I welcome you to correct me. I'm trying to improve. חומר הזרע שהרופא יזריק לתוך גופה, יש בזה סיבוכים. אם הזרע הוא של ישראל, יש לבן אב ישראל, ויוכל לצאת תקלה מזה. זה אפשר שיזדמן שהנולד הזה ייקח אישה שהיא אחותו מאביו. אוקיי. ואם הנולד תהיה בת, תקח בעל שהוא אחיה מאביה. אך אם חומר הזרע...
No, that's my only correction right now. The other side, right?
Okay. I'll put an exclamation mark there. אם חומר הזרע יחכו משל גוי... ייקחו, thank you. משל גוי, אז הילד לא מתייחס לאביו כלל, ואין לו בעולם, רק אם בלבד.
Yeah, I mean, there's a wipeout of the genetic donor.
Right, we're saying this child has no father.
Yeah, yeah. So let's go on. I find this tshuva, you could tell the parts that I love, and it's also, I think it's very harsh in its own ways. It's kind of like the halacha, okay, this is how we see it halachically. Od yesh b'zeh sibuch. So Gersh, would you read? Od yesh b'zeh sibuch.
עוד יש בזה סיבוך. אם מעשה זריקה יהיה בימי טומאתה, הרי זה בנידה. מכיוון שתחילת העיבור היה בימי טומאתה. אף על פי שאין כאן איסור ובנידה קשה לבוא בכלל ישראל, עם כל זה פגום יהיה, כי יצירה שלו הייתה בימי טומאתה. וזה יכול לגרום לילד שיהיו לו מידת נשחטות ואז מידות נשחטות ואז פנים. ואז הרכבת מידותיו יהיה נשחטות מאוד, וגם אפשר שיהיו המצורע. על כל פנים תביא עולם איש משחט לנפש טמא.
Okay, so this is very, very, but who wants to have these possible midot? I mean, halachically, the real important statement is, right, she'ein kan isur. That's the important halachic statement. But is it wise? And of course, making the assumption that you're going to get bad genetic material for your midot elsewhere. So first of all, Sarah and then Ruben. Yeah, Sarah, you have a point?
Oh, this is just a sort of scientific little tidbit.
Yeah, please.
It's worth noting that at least like standard of care today is often to do both artificial like intrauterine insemination and like implantation of embryos, right kind of in the border zone where one could be Nita, depending on like how many days depending on what Shita you follow, etc. So like this is actually a very live question, potentially.
Yeah, okay, good. Oh, okay, thank you.
It's quite often the case that
not from my perspective, but like
okay.
Yeah.
We're exploring it. Gersh, yeah.
Yeah, there's quite often the case that the number of scans required could effectively make a woman nida if there's pitichat harechem. So you've got all kinds of issues there.
Explain that a little more.
Sorry?
Sorry, could you explain that a little more?
The scan, depending on the size of the scanner when it's inserted, the fi'alacha, depending, could actually make the woman a nida afilu below dam. So if the poskim seem to agree that any insertion of the scanner into the scanner.
Want me to explain that really quickly?
The scanner that basically checks the thickness of the lining of the uterine wall. Were they looking for?
Sorry, I apologize, Gersh. They do an ultrasound. The ultrasound is done. They call it a wand. The wand is basically the shape. Let's call it the shape of a penis, more or less. It goes into the vagina, and it can look at. Normally, a woman would drop 1 or maybe 2 eggs per month. And when you do IVF, there are these things called oocytes, which is basically a potential egg. and they give you so many hormones that you produce 10 or 20 or 30 of them. And then they're monitoring their growth over like 2 weeks. And the way they monitor their growth is with an ultrasound, but they can't do it from outside the body. They do this penis-shaped wand that monitors it from the inside. And I think Gersh is saying that if the wand creates bleeding, then you could have an issue.
Well,
You
so
say
far
there
as
are something-
I've seen it, it's not even if there's no blood, if it's considered to be wide enough to be Petichat Rechem, they consider the woman an Nida anyway.
Huh.
And she becomes a Nida, and then what?
Then the child is a Ben Nida.
Yeah.
And that's the
Is a
concern of
Ben
the
Nida.
Hard Tzvi.
Yeah. Mhm.
I
Well,
remember
that's the-
reading somewhere that they asked a question to Rav Moshe Feinstein like a couple of years ago about like the children of non-religious couple that became Baal Tshuva, whether they should have a chashash of Ben Nida or not, because the mother obviously never went to the mikvah. And he said, if I remember reading it correctly, he said that it's not relevant to a certain extent. It's like if someone has a good character, so then you can assume that it's not Ben Nida. So like it doesn't seem too worried by it. So I don't know.
No, but here he's saying that, but that actually confirms what we're saying, because he's saying if post factum you see that he's a good person, then obviously he wasn't a Ben Nida. But here he's saying we're creating somebody l'chatchila who will be a Ben Nida, and that's his concern. I mean,
So
I'm not
I'm
saying it's a
gonna-
real concern. I mean, whatever. That's his concern. That is his
Like,
concern.
no, I get that, but what I understood from the Tshuva is that nowadays we're no longer too worried about Ben Nida anymore. Like it's
Right.
not,
That Shuva, he talks about how people go to pools all the time, and therefore, maybe she went to a pool. so-
Therefore, they're converted to Judaism according to conservative halacha.
No, but his point is that maybe she's not
Yeah,
really.
I know, I
Maybe he's
know.
not really a Ben Nida. It's a legitimate
Yeah.
thought that this child is not a Ben Nida. But here we know he's a Ben Nida, or we. That's I think.
So I want now to finish this tshuva up and just start on something else for a few minutes. If you look at the two lines from the bottom, Rakim Yirtzu Yichoyel Mebeit Ish Yudi Tahor V'Yasu Al Yedei Imus Sheyel Lahem Kiven. There's a period of time that there were a lot of Jewish orphans. 1950s. There was a Jewish orphanages in every city in the United States. And there were many orphans in Israel. And I checked, and there were orphanages in England, Jewish orphanages. And it was hard to get people to adopt these children because why not start together, start pure, start like this. So I'm wondering, you see what I'm wondering? I'm wondering about this impact on this, that out through the imuts, yes, you will have a son. And this is the other way of your fulfilling their approval. But he doesn't cancel, he has certain problems, but he doesn't cancel Hazra'ah Malchutit and the Malchutit. And again, going to the first paragraph, he has a mother. He has a mother. So now my question is, what about the father? Like the father's just dropped there. This father is like it's like Joseph in the New Testament. Like, what's he doing? He's just waiting around. I mean, like, what's his role? And I want to go to a second tshuva. As these tshuvas mount, then the interest and the direction continue. I'm not going to read the whole tshuva. Go look on that same page at Siman Daled. And we'll just skip to the bottom. He quotes the Beit Shmuel, the Yesh Levi Raya Me Hagaot Smach, V'Abach Mevio. Then we go again. We're now on page 8 or Vav on that page 8, right? And Matzati Bagot Smach that Isha Nida Yichala Lishkav Astinei Ba'ala. V'niz harot mesididim sheshachav alehem ish acher pen titaber me shichva abe shichat zera sha'acher. So this evidently was a method that they had. Right? Sounds unusual, but not so unusual now that we have artificial insemination. But here he says is what? She could be a nida because it's not a problem. Why? Because there was no sexual intercourse.
So this would seem to suggest that when women,
But
women are
Amai
most fertile-
Gersh, next one, a couple of words. It would suggest. Amai Eina Chosheshet Benidota. So why aren't we worried about, or why isn't she worried about her nida? Me Shichvat Zera Shel Ba'ala, V'yei Avora Ben Hanida. Okay, why? The Heshiv came into Ein Kan Biat Isur. Just as we had said before, and it's hammered home here, Ein Kan Biat Isur, Havlad Kosher Legamre. The issue about the scanner is a side issue, but nonetheless, even that would seem to be kosher because it's not a sexual act. This is the benefits, the halachic benefit. Afil tita ber. Now get this. Afil tita ber mishichvat zera shel acher ki alo ben sira kosher haya. That question you had earlier, Joel, like who's the father in this case? Well, according to this understanding, it was some guy. And therefore, isn't this a problem? Kalo ben sira kosher hayat. So even if the genetic material, so in other words, what's he doing here? Getting rid of the whole, he starts by getting rid of the whole notion of problem of ben tuma, of tuma. Tuma refers to a cycle that's in reference in terms of Easter Beheter, that in a sense is a problem in terms of a sexual act. This is not a sexual act. And now we say it's not a sexual act. There's no problem here of adultery. Ella de meshichvat zera shel ish acher kapdinen. Okay, so we have this is a normal thing in psak halacha. Okay, you can be careful about it. If you want to be like Gersh, you can be careful about it. Kapdinen avchana gezera shema yisach. You know, you have to always be careful because you don't know who the Isha, and maybe there could possibly be some situation in which a sister marries a brother. But he doesn't seem to be very worried about it here. He said you could be makbi, but in actual psak halacha, she's not a bat nida. Sorry, he's not a ben nida. She's not considered the classic nida of the East, you know, in terms of Easter. There is no adultery here. There's a move here from how he dealt with, with artificial insemination from the earlier psak, even though he matters it, but there's really a move here.
Sorry.
So just to be
quick
clear,
question.
Gershon's point about the wand actually comes out that that's not a ben nida. Even if she would be a nida, it's not, a child is not called a ben nida.
No, I mean, to be fair, it was never a question of the Dayan that I asked. It wasn't a question of a ben nida. I mean, that wasn't the concern. It was more to do with the fact that does it make her a nida for the practical.
Right,
purpose.
I understand. But here we're seeing, but you brought it up as an interesting question, and now we're seeing clearly that that the child that wouldn't be a problem. So therefore, it wouldn't be a problem.
Can we read this?
And you go even a step further. Even if the woman would be in a matzav of nida mamash, the child would not be considered a ben nida because there was no sin of the father, so to speak.
You'd hear so many stories of couples that can't get pregnant because they can't actually conceive during a woman's most fertile point, which is normally sometime, just before she goes to the mikveh.
But they're not doing
I know, but it's never, as far as I've heard, it's never suggested as some way to circumvent the additional Shiva Nikiyim. Because that seems to me like a heter to actually.
No, I think it's just that people don't want to go to the trouble, don't want to go and do all these tipulim. It's a big deal. They'd
I think here
rather
and
get
there,
pregnant.
I think here in
Depends on the
Eretz
card,
Yisrael,
doesn't it?
it's done all the time. By the way, in Eretz Yisrael, everyone gets 2 kids. It's very expensive, right? A lot of people make Aliyah for a while, especially from America, especially modern Orthodox, they make Aliyah for a while in order to go through. Israel believes in kids, at least Jewish kids, I have to say. But I don't know if it's open to their population or not. I shouldn't say that, I don't know. But to go back, yeah, and they're doing it even when it borders or seems to fall into the Nida period. So actually, you're right by saying this sounds like accurate. This is what's quoted often.
Yeah.
And
great.
there's a tremendous pushback by the Satmar influence group, tremendous pushback on the other side. So that's really, so you guys as a posek, right? Poskim, you'll make your decisions in how you will advise people or help them see through the situation. Now, okay, it's fair to take a break now. We'll take a break for 5 minutes. There's a few things here in this and one other tshuva that's very important. And I think we're, okay, 5 minutes. Recording practice. So go to the next column over. In the middle column, 4 lines down, the middle paragraph, Zeme Kavara Marti, right? Go down 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Beleda, I was like, Ken Yeshlomar, the Beleda Alide Ampatia, Havinami Milta de Loshchicha. It's such a weird case to base it on. And then go down 2 lines. 2 lines. So we're from the top paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think it's 6 lines. Da Alide Ambatia. How are you going to tell? Somebody else was there doing what they're doing. And this line, Man Masid Dinit Abra Dafka Misa. How do you know? So they bring a case that, there's a case of case in the Torah. What do you do with the Yerusha of a person, the Ein Lo Goel? He has no redeemer, meaning he has no family. Gemara asked, what do you mean? Every Jews all have family. It might be distant, but you have family. So what's the case of a person who has no goel, has no family? The property goes to the man dies. The property goes to the Kohanim. But what's the case? Anybody know? What's the case? Who has no family? Or potentially has no family? A ger has no family. They marry, they have a family, whatever, but they don't have a family. And so, since this is not his fetish, it's someone else's. Since they only mention the ger, but they don't mention the child who is the son of the bathtub or the son of the swimming pool, that's a proof that the kid in the swimming pool has family. Since the only one, She'ein Lo Goel, is a ger who never married, and they don't mention the child in which who's the son of the mother who's impregnated in the bathtub, it shows that he does have a father. And if he does have a father, the presumption is it's the Jewish Jewish father. Fine.
A quick question: he has a Jewish mother, though. Doesn't that count? He said earlier that.
Yeah.
For what?
It's an Indian of inheritance. And in this case, they're not assuming any inheritance coming through the mother. That's the answer to that. Now, second paragraph from the bottom. Was the mid 15th century in Algeria. She'im nit abra bambatia dino kivno l'chol davar. He's the father's son. V'chein b'tshuvot shoel meishiv, which is Rabbi Yitzchak Reines, dato shenolad me'ibur shadei ambatia hu b'no l'chol davar. So the poskim take anything possible and they say it belongs to, and the father is the father. Go to the next page. So therefore there's a problem at the top. Problem comes from the Taz. It talks about the father. The low kiyem, do you see it there? Page 8a, I have it. I think it's 8a. Did I do this page twice, Yavni?
I thought so. I thought we got it in the original packet.
Anyway, so whether it's well
You
something.
sent it in a separate email.
Sorry. Okay. The low kiyem piruvu. The father hasn't mishum shalo asa ma'asa klal b'poel. The Taz says, okay, it's the father. Okay, so it's a milsa de lo shchiach. It's unusual, but this is the father. We still have a problem, he says. It's not a problem about the child anymore. It's not the problem about yichus anymore. It's the problem about the father. Has he been Makayim Pruvu, but he didn't do Shalo Asa Masa Klal B'Poel. He didn't effectively do an action. L'shem kiyum hamitzvah. V'kach chosa b'shelat yavetz. She'eno makayim mitzvah puravu kishe'eno oseh shum masa. L'kiyum hamitzvah. So now the Hartzvi says, well, that maybe be the case of a guy lying on a sheet and passively ejaculating. That might be the case of a guy swimming in the water. Aval, he says, Bahazra'a malachutit. You can find it with the malachutit is kind of disfigured there. Aval Bahazra'a malachutit, artificial insemination. Kevin the motzi zera l'shem kach. Since he ejaculated in terms of the father for that purpose, the gam masha rofe oseh hazrika, and that which the doctor has done, the injection, yesh ladun dehu shlucho shel habal. Ushlucho kimoto. Ein makom lomar shelo kiyem pruvu.
Cool.
This is an argument to try legitimate artificial insemination and to resuscitate the potentially missing father, because this halacha would also follow in a case in which it wasn't his zera. I should say one more word on this. The next paragraph, just one more word. The second paragraph. That's he's talking about the Satmar Rav. Satmar Rav says this is masturbation and it's also midiraita. This is artificial insemination husband, and it's also because masturbation. That's what the Satmar Rav said. The nidon kamotzi zero batala, it's masturbation. Gamuzeh ein hachrech. This is not a necessary argument. Shaharei osezeh. Can't believe my great grandfather. He sounds like he's a new ager. She'osas el l'shem tikun, that word, v'lo derech hashchata. It's not for the purpose of masturbation, it's for the purpose of making things work. And therefore, in the case of artificial insemination, husband, this act is an act of tikkun. It's a full act. What the doctor does, he does as a shliach. And I think this can go a step further. And the step further is brought by the comment by his editor, Mehagon Rav Yosef Cohen. Rav Yosef Cohen, cousin. Rav Yosef Cohen was Av Beitin when my great-grandfather died. Av Beitin in Yerushalayim. And he has a very interesting point here. The Gam Masha Rofei Oseh Zrika Yesh Ladun Dehu Shlucho Shalbal. He's quoting the Harsdi. Yesh Layin Im Shaykh B'zeh Shlichut. He's coming off saying, like, I don't think this is Shlichut. V'marofei Hu Goy Ma Yesh Lomar B'zeh. A Shliach is the din of Shliach is a Jew with a fellow Jew. But he said, but there's something else to say. Umikan hochacha umasha umarnu la'el. Something we said earlier. Shegeder meets the definition of misa through or vu, who can mitzvat hadlakat and they wrote the Shabbos. Never thought putting those two together. That's why, by the way, it's good to be a great gaon as opposed to a scholar. Scholar, you follow the material. Great gaon, you come out, you bring things in from left field, right field. Who can mitzvat hadlakat and wrote the Shabbos? Why? What's the halacha of writing of the benching lech? Shah mitzvah he. This is such a brisker thing. Shah mitzvah he shah neirot you delukim. The mitzvah is that there should be candles lit in the house. It's not a mitzvah that you should light candles. The mitzvah is that you should have candles lit in the house. All you have to do is a grama, which is much less than a full act. You're the one who kind of started the circle going. The ain't sarich by lighting candles. The person who lights candles for is not shlichus. Oh no, I feel going. By the way, you can't make it home. You call a friend who's not Jewish, a person working in your home, and say, please light candles for me. Why? Who's not a shliach? But you are makayim the mitzvah, because your responsibility is what? Is that candles should be lit. There should be lit candles. I have to say it right. There should be lit candles in the house. And you come back, you can make the bracha on it. And therefore, this in the same point here. But I think this, therefore, the Chiddush takes things much further. So this would work. That artificial insemination donor, right? It's not the husband and what action is he, but the donor, you have a real problem. In that case, what's the husband doing at all? He's not doing anything. I'm bringing up the problem. I'll give the answer in a moment. He's not doing anything. What's he doing? He's not doing he's not doing anything. What the Harzvi said above is that, fine, he does things, he does it in terms of gathering the semen, the doctor is a shliach, fine. But what about, so he said, so pru or vu here is understood by Yosef Cohen, that's how, is that it's a mitzvah like Never Shabbos, that is that the effect must be present. And so therefore, what does the Baal need to do? All the Baal needs to do is to make sure it happens. That's a narrow Shabbos. I would say that would also go in terms of artificial insemination donor. The husband who is active with with his wife, and I'm talking about a classic marriage. A donor, a husband is active with the wife and make sure that it takes place, and schleps her to all the tests and is with her, and make sure that it happens, and they try to get the right time, the right doctors. He's the go-rain, or he's one of the go. He's involved in pruruvu. In other words, there's an argument here, a very good argument of a way of looking at things in which you don't end up with someone outside of the mitzvah or outside of the family. That he, as being the go-rain, is involved with pruruvu. Normal way of saying about pruruvu is how's a father involved in such case? Father meaning husband in terms of the family, classic family. Okay, he teaches the son's Torah, and the son, and therefore anyone who teaches a person Torah becomes a father to that person. Fine, but I'm saying it starts a step early. Since we live in this technological world, which is very frightening and is very difficult, and it's very hard for one person to do it on her own, and it takes someone else often be helpful, although she's doing the majority of the work and it's her body and all that. But if there's a cooperation and he's involved, he's dead. He's dead. He's the go-rain for pruruvu. If she says, honey, I couldn't have done it without you, that's psak halacha, that's the go-rain. I think what I'm trying to understand is that there are cases that can be built for responding to the fears that I think are real fears and real concerns. Is it in terms of how do you make a family? How do you make a family? And therefore that there are halachic ways of viewing it, that it's a real way of making a family. This turns out right now to be like a punchline. Didn't mean it for it to be a punchline, but all the other ways as true, as the same thing. Does a person do a pa'ula? Let's look at it. Satmar Rav says it's hashchata, it's destruction. Another way of looking at it is tikkun. In that case of the donor being the husband being the one. Is the doctor just an implement, or maybe the doctor? It's easier here in Israel. Maybe the doctor is actually a shliach. Is the human involvement in making sure that all this happens? Does that create a family and create a status? This can probably be expanded elsewhere as well. There's ways of thinking, this is and that and
Question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you think this also applies where, and is he saying that the father, and we said that the father is the shliach and therefore is mekayim the mitzvah pruruvu? Would you say that also applies if the zera is from a goy and he is the one, mitzaveh, that this should happen? He's the one bringing, he's bringing his wife there, and he is running.
I think so.
It seems to me, yes.
I've actually used this at Paskin this way to a nervous dad. I mean, he's sterile. I will always in some way, a lovely person, I will always in some way be separate from my son. I think it's good for my wife that she's good. I always say, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? You're a poel in this whole thing. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen unless you're part. You're
100 years ago, he wouldn't.
There's shlichus, and there's also you're the go-rain. It's a way of thinking about it. I said, you're not thinking right. You're not thinking Jewishly. You're not thinking halachically.
He's actually taka Mekayim the mitzvah.
You are Mekayim the mitzvah. How else are you going to be Mekayim the mitzvah?
Well, in that case, you're right. You wouldn't.
No, so we have emuts, we have, that too. We have adoption. We have, but okay. So it's be marbe the potentiality of different ways of seeing it. Ruben, what do you got?
I just have a question I have a hard time understanding. So we say that when the husband does Ashwata Zera and then the doctor becomes like his shaliach, so they consider proper action to be Mekayim Pirah V'Rivia, right? But what happened when it's another Jew that does it? Like that doesn't that causes a problem of mamzerut to a certain extent? Because him also, right?
Wait. Why?
Another Jew does what?
Another
what?
Jew like gives his sperm, like that's what it is, right? It
That's
gives
you're
his
not allowed.
No, but he says he's allowed earlier.
No, we didn't say that.
He says earlier in the earlier tshuva. He says,
We have no. He says it's allowed. There's a hakpada. There's a concern,
right?
but it's limited to a hakpada,
Right. So it's not an issue.
because the status of the child, the genetic, again, according to Hartzvi, the status of the child is not influenced by the genetic material, even though he talks about it's better not being from a goy and all that. But nonetheless, the status of the change, status, adultery, etc., only is on the basis of a physical act of sexual congress.
It didn't say anything about sexual conduct. It said a physical act, and in this case, it says that when you do it, it's a physical act.
So earlier,
it's considered proper ma'aseh.
Not sure what you're referring to. You're referring to the sheep?
The hashchatat zera has nothing to do with mamzeru.
No, but what he's saying is that when the husband does hashchatat zera and then the doctor puts it in, that's considered proper ma'aseh for Pirah V'Rivia, right? Is Mekayim the mitzvah through that. My question is, when another Jew does it for him, that's also then considered proper ma'aseh for Pirah V'Rivia, and then therefore it kind of creates a problem of mamzerut.
Of course it creates a problem on zerus. So I don't understand what you're saying. Yeah.
Right, but he's saying that it's.
Wait, it wouldn't be, no, you wouldn't, you're saying,
Are you saying
no,
that
we
the
said that there's not a
doctor being
mamzer. I take it back.
Jewish is the problem?
We said it's not a mamzer unless there was a forbidden act. There was no forbidden act. The only problem of using another Jew's seed is that the child might marry his brother unbeknownst.
Right, it's not
Not a mamzer. There's not a mamzer there.
But my question is, why not? If his act is a proper act to be Mekayim Pirah V'Rivia, why is it not considered a mamzer?
Because that's what you just explained.
Because
that
it's not sex.
Pirah Rivia is that like lighting Shabbos candles, just that there should be a child created. It doesn't require an act in that.
It doesn't make every I wasn't trying to prove that it makes every taxi driver into an adulterer. Yeah, opens the door. It doesn't. I wasn't trying to say.
So here's a follow-up question: the Jew that gives his zera, is he Mekayim Pirah V'Rivia himself?
Say that again. What?
The Jew, like let's say another Jew gives his zera for another couple to have a baby. Is he Mekayim Pirah V'Rivia? Because by that logic, he is.
Yeah. The genetic material is not giving it.
The child is not a mamzer. He's creating it.
Right. The child is not a mamzer. Let's say we argue on that, right? But is the person that gives away his zera?
You're saying and then your next question is how can both men be Mekayim the mitzvah peravu? How can the donor and also the husband?
Okay,
interesting question.
Well, no, I think the question is, can two men get the mitzvah and the credit here? And I think that if we're saying that the husband who is not the contributor of the genetic material is the father, then I think the Jewish sperm donor has not done pru'ervu. And I would actually extend the question and say something like, let's say the wife has never had a miscarriage and she gives birth to a boy. And the donor, let's say, is a Levi and her husband is not. Do you do Kedyon haben? I think that the status of the child in that way, for things that rely on what are we is it the genes of the father or is it the act of being a father? I think there's a lot of interesting questions there, but I think if I like the heart speed, I'm going with the heart speed. And I think he's saying the husband is the father and the genes are not the point here.
The genes are not the point. You're right.
No, the
That's
genes
what
are not the point, but I agree the genes are not the point, but the Jewish man who donated that sperm, he did an act to try to create life. He wanted to create life, and he did create life. Why are you denying him the mitzvah?
He gets shlishi on Shabbos, but not at the family's event. On the other side of that. Okay,
Then
Sarah,
how do
what
you
do
get
you
around
got?
the problem of Ashkatat
Sarah, what do you
Zera?
got?
No, so my question is, I was just wondering whether maybe this is like a step too far, but I'm wondering if you can say there's like something qualitatively different about the maaseh for the donor and for the father case. And so then it we might be willing to say, yeah, where the father is where you're doing, insemination with a father sperm, the father is intending like Jafka in a very kind of clear way to do Priya like with this woman at this time in this like highly medically circumscribed, like super arduous, annoying, difficult context. And that's somehow a different kind of more intense shlichut or whatever than what is going on with the donor, where the donor is essentially like putting it into a sperm bank to be kept for some complicated amount of time, and he doesn't know what's going to happen to it and all these other
But he's
things.
still doing an act for the purpose of a woman becoming pregnant and making.
Yeah,
and
but I think it also depends on
baby.
if we use
Yeah, but
like
it's like more disconnected somehow. Like, I don't know. I wonder if you can like pull apart those.
I'm
two
also
different
just thinking
kinds
of the Halakat Nerot framework, right? Where I've almost like, if we think about it as like, it's like the chefza of having kids in your family/household, basically. That's the thing, not so much the like you physically contributing to the birth of a child. And so if we think about it that way, that it's like, you need to have candles lit in your home. You need to have like a son and a daughter essentially in your home. Then the person who's like giving sperm to a sperm bank, like they don't really have the chefza that the Priya is like focused
So you're
upon.
saying if I'm hanging out at your house before Shabbat and you ask me to light candles, then that counts for you. But then I go home and I don't have candles lit in my house. I haven't fulfilled the mitzvah of lighting candles for Shabbat. You have.
Right, because there's no mitzvah to light candles. No mitzvah to light candles, the mitzvah to have candles.
Right.
Let
Let me take that one step further. If you want somebody else to light candles, let's say you're supposed to own the candles, actually. You're allowed to give a pruta to the Baal Bayit and say, I buy a pruta of your candle.
Wait,
and
is this Hanukkah you're talking about? Is it Hanukkah candles?
Oh, maybe I'm confusing about it. Maybe Shabbos candles.
So,
You don't have,
I don't think it's Shabbos. No, seriously, I don't think it's Shabbos. But
you don't have to
check.
own the candles.
No, what do you got? Speak to the group.
No, so I just I have to dig it up, but I heard a shir from Yisachar Katz a while back where he's talking not about this case, but a case where the ova comes from one woman but it's implanted in a different woman's uterus, and he actually makes the claim that both are the M, that you can, and he has a Gemara that he bases this on. I can't remember what it is. So you could imagine a case where maybe there's two avot for this case, and it gets very complicated, obviously, of like beyond just like who gets the Kohen Aliyah and if you can or not, but it's possible to have two people who are responsible, according to his logic at least, for the.
Okay.
Talks about this.
I would say that what we have here, of course, one of the things we've been seeing is a decisions, a group of decisions of creating. Excuse me for saying it. The word about to say sanctity. I try never to use that word. I'm not that kind of rabbi, but to create sanctity and stability within a very potentially alienated situation, alienated situation. So legitimate questions have to be is it really going to work within the society, not just a one-term heter, but is it really going to work? I can see two mothers, in terms of a lesbian family, et cetera, maybe in their community it works. does the fact of having two fathers, two mothers work in a more hetero community? I don't know, but that sounds like I actually just don't know. And one of the areas of this regarding psak that you will all find is that you have to make decision for the person. That's really first and the most important. But they also, it has to be a psak that can be lived through. That can be, you know, that could work out. So those are my in a sense, concluding the thoughts on that issue. But I'll take one more thought from someone. Anybody else? Okay, Gersh.
Well, it's not so much a thought, but I was thinking in terms of medical negligence. So when the child is clearly from couldn't have possibly been, by immediately looking, so, you know, the donor got mixed up and happened to be in an African person, or where it's clearly evident that it couldn't have been. And
right.
I know you could probably say, well, there's imuts or other things that you could consider, but where it's so blatantly, patently obvious that he can't, there's no nechshav lo kibano, because it's so clearly evident that the two parents are not of the same racial extraction. So I wonder how you solve that, because medical negligence has clearly occurred. It's been known. There's been lots of cases of where they've recorded the wrong number down, took out the wrong sperm, even if it's the same genetic material as the father and mother. They've made mistakes. You know, there's no shimur in the same way. And I know of an organization in London that actually provides shomrim for the entire thing.
For what? In order to make sure. Go ahead. Sense. Shomrim. What do they do? Just tell me what they do.
They observe the extraction. They observe the coding of the extraction of the sperm in cases where the sperm is not retrieved naturally. They record the mother's genetic material as well. And so where the embryo is created externally, everything matches up, and it's not just one.
Well, listen, I like situations in which when people are really paranoid, there's a way of, I consider this paranoia, a way of calming people down. The question is, does it then become a chiyuv to have this? And since generally there is, well, do you, sorry for asking a personal question. In England, do you drink milk only with a hechsher?
No.
Okay. And the reason for that is Cheryl once said to me, we don't agree with Americans' foreign policy, but we agree with their dairy policy. And that's it's not pig's milk, you know, it's not Campbell's milk. That's the situation. No, so I think about here, and I'm serious about the first part. I mean, it was a little smarmy, but I didn't really mean it as much that way. People want to be careful. There has to be a way of being careful. But one of the things, again, got this picture behind me. I like it when, you know, so what's the halacha? And the halacha is that since we have a very good chazaka about the hospitals, it can happen. So you don't have to do it. You want to do it, do it. You want to do it. But if this is going to mean that, you know, you can't marry off your daughter because you're drinking the wrong milk, or in a case in which, you know, somebody else's daughter, they didn't have the proper shomrim there. I think that's ridiculous. It's like too much. And that's where some of this goes. Okay, so I'm happy with this. I'm going to let me just take you for a moment to there's so much other things I want to do. Let me just one more. Give me 1 minute. No, I'll leave it at that. I'll leave tonight at that. So send me suggestions. Okay, but I'm happy to learn with you. And happy to, I'm happy that the learning is real. Thank you. Nachum, want to tell us what we're doing next time?
Yeah, next time we're starting Hilchot Kiddushin, which is Siman Kavav. We're not having class until the 4th of October, but I'll send out some sources.
Chaflav? Yeah. Okay.
Kavav 26. That's the
Mhm.
beginning, the first Siman in Hilchot Kiddushin.
And what should we do to prepare?
I will send out some sources, but yeah, I will send out. But you can obviously look at the Siman, and also should look at the Rambam on the same thing, on the same Siman, on this. I mean, where it is, I'll send you. There's a Gemara in Gittin, and that we should also see.
Okay,
I'll send
great.
I'll send out some.
All right, Yeshkach, everyone really. Gemar Chatima Tova. Should be a good end.
Chatima tova.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Archatima tova.